In such circumstances, we cross about the pause of the production process, but also the increase of the cost of distribution. So um, I think as the production was regularized during the pandemic, uh, new problems appear as part of the effects of the pandemic because we have problems with the availability of containers and the space in ships. And I think the most important was the congestion of containers in the transshipment ports. And of course, I think the cost of the distribution was not the only problem that we face as a companies. Um, I think there were an uncertain of deliveries time. So we know that in that time there were not guarantees of anything for anyone. For me, a good example of this, just to have an example of this situation, is that the maritime freight from China to Mexico used to cost around $1,200, and during this process, increased up to 1,200% in that time. So it was an incredible impact, and I think even though some companies could afford that cost, to try to reduce the risk of the uncertain time, uh, I think okay, you could be paid the cost, but without guarantees. So therefore, as part of the pandemic effects, um, it was a clear trend that most of the companies explore new countries or new territories to try to reduce the risk of the uncertain time.
Thank you, Susan. And I'll take it from there with Rafa. Um,
Sure. Thank you. So, so we're talking here about how manufacturing powers Swift or is swifting from China to Mexico, right? And then the question that is surrounding where we're focusing right now is why Mexico, right? And that's pretty much one of the reasons that Susan was explaining before. But also not more important or anything, but also one of the things that if you ask me when trying to answer the question on why Mexico has to do with international and geopolitical trends that are happening in the world at the moment. So when you think about geopolitics, I think it is crucial to understand what we're talking about and how geopolitics is different to geography. And most importantly, maybe making sure that geopolitics not necessarily is so attached to a place, or meaning nearshoring for geopolitical reasons not necessarily mean bringing somebody closer in territory to you. So what is geography? We all know about geography is where countries are, where everyone is located from a space wise perspective. Geopolitics mixes the concept of geography of where is happening to the concept of politics, which takes us to what is happening. So if you ask me to put it in a simple way, if I wanted to explain geopolitics to one of my children, I would say, well, it is about what is happening where. That is all about geopolitics. And if you read all the literature nowadays, you will see that CEOs, boardrooms, executives, you name it, the word geopolitics is so much more in their heads and in their speeches than it might be maybe 5 or 10 years ago, because it is an issue. It is an issue. I don't want to get into politics here, but there are global events that are happening at the moment that global companies, especially companies based out of in the US or based out in Australia or in developed European countries with high standards of regulations, and if you're a public company that you have standards or high standards of reporting, well, they are sensitive to things like war in Ukraine, how Russia is behaving, how China is behaving as a government. We already talked about forced labor before. So those kind of things are really important nowadays. So
I'm gonna stop you right there, Rafa, to introduce Renata to follow up on the ideas that you are presenting.
Yes,
Sure.
and just complementing what Rafael was saying, which I completely agree. Um, besides the proximity, what Mexico offers in terms of incentives is currently not what we can see in other countries in Latin America. So, in my position, I get to compare a lot what Mexico offers against what other countries in Latin America offer, which also have somehow the proximity with US, but do not have like an IMEX program, do not have the same free trade agreements that we in Mexico have with the US, and and many other benefits like the VAT certification. I know that there has been more enforcement on those lately. Government is more attentive to that. And I'm going to say something controversial right here, that if my executives in United States heard that, they would be surprised. But in my opinion, Mexico does hold a good level of legal certainty when we compare with other countries in Latin America, even though this government is more enforceable of existing regulation and is posing further regulations, to bring Mexico to another level of compliance. But yes, when we compare with other countries, Mexico is still a very good place to invest.
Thank you, Renata. Susan, some closing ideas for this first part of the panel.
Thank you, Rafa. As I summarized, we know that with all the factors that we reach during this process of nearshoring, I think Mexico in a short time will be a key player for the trade, not only as a partner for US, but also for all Latin America.
Thank you. Rafa.
Yeah. Well, to complete the idea of what my colleagues here are saying is that pretty much what everyone is thinking on, and what keeps us awake at night is executives are thinking about where we're going to be building the factories in the future, and everyone is pretty much aware that they want to build it in like-minded jurisdictions, not necessarily somewhere that is really close to you, but somewhere where the government and the institutions and everything else is pretty much functioning in a similar manner to how it is functioning in the developed world.
Cultural embracement. Renata.
Yeah.
And I think also that it has been said in one of the panels that already happened here, is what I think it's important is Mexico has got US eyes turned to it. But how do we make it sustainable for the future? Like all the benefits I mentioned here, they are existing, they function. But as more as Mexico receives incentives and, foreign requirement from different international companies, how is Mexico going to keep up with that? I think that discussion needs to start happening right now.
Exactly. So how do we keep it up? How do we make it not a trend, but a long-lasting experience for companies seeking to establish themselves, to provide the very large American market and elsewhere worldwide? So focusing on the US, but also establishing a manufacturing base that can export worldwide. And with that, I would like to move to the second part of our panel, where we will explore the operational challenges that relocating manufacturing operations in Mexico mean, or enhancing the current ones. What are we facing? What needs to be done in order to achieve what Renata said, to obtain sustainability in the long term? And here I would like to begin with Susan. Your thoughts on this?
Well, I think one of the most important things that the companies should be evaluated as part of the process to move the operational side, it's determine the land and where they should be the great place to do that. Um, in my opinion, as the other tables are sharing before, there is a preference, a natural preference to for the states in the north border strip in Mexico. And there is Coahuila, Monterrey, Baja California, because probably the infrastructure of those states are really good, and it's a result of many years of work in terms of the development of the country. But that preference caused many problems. One of them is that it's the perfect opportunity for the real estate companies to monopolize the sector. And so that
So you're facing now issues with the negotiation of the agreements, the availability of the land, because it's becoming scarce, and then the companies that manage industrial parks are exercising monopolistic power in the sense that they're imposing clauses or conditions on the agreements.
to be honest, because as always happen when there is demand, probably there is an storage. So that is the reason why when you establish a negotiation with the companies, probably the level of your leverage to negotiate the contract is minimum. So I don't want to say it in that manner, but probably you could accept not at all fair conditions for the contracts. But it's an important thing to decide where you could establish your new site for production.
Thank you. Rafa, your take on that?
Sure. Well, again, when bringing manufacturing forces from China to Mexico, one of the challenges, operational challenges, that we as a legal department has been facing is the need to, let's say, conduct increased due diligence, if you will, because I mean, not because of fact, just you have somebody new in Mexico that is going to be doing things for you, are you going to be using as a manufacturer? Well, the due diligence, you cannot just make it less constringent or less deep because of that. Because again, as Alejandro mentioned before, China is not only moving, we're not competing with China anymore, but China is also gaining presence in Mexico. So it might be very well the case that you think you're near shoring to Mexico with Mexican entities, but it's still, the Chinese company, if you will, doing business geographically in Mexico, but still on their different standards. So that is one of the challenges I've been facing: the need to conduct increased due diligence and making sure that we as a U.S. company know who are we doing business with. Another one is FCPA. It's really important to conduct training to make sure that we continue exporting the culture of not entering into bribes. It's we just heard a panel that we said everyone does it. Well, that we cannot control, but we as a company can control the training we conduct. We can control what we tell to our employees. We can protect our company by saying, listen, we cannot guarantee what our employees do, but we can guarantee that we're doing everything that the law requires us, so we avoid those kind of practices. And one thing, when I stand here,
and let me stop you there, because you're touching an important point, which is regulation.
Yes.
How regulation affects the decision-making process.
Indeed.
And we see in this graph that Mexico is number 4 in the global business complexity ranking for 2023. So although there's a great opportunity, this means that there are also great challenges due to the complexity. So Renata, your take on regulation.
Yeah. So besides the existing regulation that is already in place in Mexico, recently we have seen an enhancement of those regulations. I may name a few that have impacted our business. One was on labeling requirement before leaving customs facilities according to Mexican norms. So that was the one that really impacted many companies, including 3M, to prepare and to execute those. I mean, the rules changed very fast, and it required, to partner with other suppliers in Mexico, which we know it's a challenge. And also, although in my opinion, the rules and the new requirements that are coming, they are clear in their format, meaning there's no controversy, but the enhancement of the enforcement of those is not so clear. So in many instances, like for example, in an enrollment for an AEO certification, the authority keeps coming back with demands or with questions that are not reasonable. And many, many times, sometimes to gain time, sometimes with collection intents, and that has become quite challenging for operating in Mexico lately. Also, the labor challenging with the outsourcing law that was already discussed. And Susan, I would like to hear your inputs on your labor experience.
Thank you, Renata. Well, it's clear that Mexico, as part of the USMCA, acquired many obligations to guarantee and protect the labor rights in Mexico. And for that reason, since 2019, the Mexican government made several modifications in our local labor law. But as an in-house lawyer, I think that is not the big challenge here, because at the end, as Hugo shared before, a few minutes before, in general, the companies in Mexico comply with the new labor law in Mexico. That is not a big deal for us. The problem is, as I mentioned, the companies prefer to establish their operation in the same area. So we face a big problem when you need to compete with other companies for the labor force, because to reduce the turnover percentage, you need to offer better packages or a benefit for the employees. So if you think as a business person, probably you know that if you offer something for your employees, probably it will be a large effect cost for your operation. So I think that it's the main thing that we need to talk about in the future as
So
a problem.
what you say is very important because, again, the law of supply and demand, this brings inflationary pressures, which we see in this graph that Mexico has an important still advantage in terms of cost versus China's labor costs. But that might not be able to keep up over time because these inflationary pressures will put the workers on a better stance in terms of negotiation, as is also the new labor law, well, not so new, but that will impose the obligation of companies to recognize collective labor agreements. And from that, I would like to move on with you, Rafa. How does this affect the supply chain as well? How do you overcome the challenges of finding adequate providers that will also comply with your manufacturing standards?
Sure. So basically, once the due diligence process is completed, I think it is important that I'm not sure if everyone here is an attorney, but I am. So in law school, they teach us everything needs to be perfect. However, the world is not perfect. So after you complete your due diligence and you get all your results and you get your red flags, all we can do is try to minimize risk by getting our third parties to sign reps and warranties. So we shift the risk. If anything happens, we are victims as well. We don't become their partners in crime. It's quite the opposite. We can say, I'm not saying let's just look the other way. No, I'm not saying that. There are red flags that cannot be tolerated. But if you have the expectation that you will find in Mexico, China, or anywhere else, partners that will be perfect, you will not find them and you will go bankruptcy, regrettably. There's got to be some room for flexibility, and the law allows you to do that. It's just that you need to protect your company again and try to swift the risk by entering into solid contracts, good compliance practices, continue training, and that's all at the end of the story what the DOJ and the regulators require, that you do your part and make sure that you help the government in fighting these not so good practices.
Okay, becoming a partner with the government in the oversight of compliance, not the oversight, but actually the contrary, to ensure compliance. And Renata, how's 3M looking at these supply chain challenges?
It's somewhat similar to what Rafa said. In our case, we really struggle to find good supply chain partners, 3PLs and brokers in my trade compliance case. And it's like Rafa said, you can't be looking for absolute perfection, but you need to at least find something good enough according to the standards. In our case, is U.S. Standards. So in the previous panel that we were talking about security, that's a great concern from ours. We have had several cases of, cargo theft, and that is very harmful to the business. And in this case, it's really important that our partners in the supply chain perspective, that they are very compliant and ready to help us in those security challenges in Mexico. Right?
And how much, at what level do you get involved and your feedback is requested or you provide it so that it enriches and influences the decision-making process?
I can say that it's frequently, when we have these problems with cargo and supply chain partners, we partner very much with our corporate security area that in 3M is within legal, the legal department. So it's very much a four hands work, and the corporate security relies much on our legal expertise on how to deal with those. And of course, we rely much on many of you as our local external counsels in Mexico to deal with that situation.
Thank you. And that is very interesting because it seems like the role of the GC is moving more into being part of the strategy and the decision-making team, and not only to stand back as on the back end of the process, just documenting and securing. So, Susan, is there a trend that you see here with nearshoring and this complex decision-making of relocating manufacturing facilities, expanding, adjusting? I know you can talk because it's public about an interesting project that PIC has. How you could share a little bit of that project and the involvement of yourself as the GC, and how has that changed as has been done in the past?
Well, first, I think I'm so proud because I'm Mexican. So when the company decides to move the other operation from France, from Greece, and also from US, was a very interesting project because.
So they're moving these production centers into Mexico. So they're closing Greece, they're closing or reducing the US, and they're moving into Mexico?
Yes, it's reducing part of the operation. And at the end of this project, probably Mexico will be the number 2 in the company around the world to be a supplier for the rest of the clients of PIC. So I think as an in-house lawyer, we have a challenge here because we should be a business partner for the company. Of course, we need to have the perspective of a legal regulation, but also we need to understand very well and manage the business strategy. And the key for us is to match our legal knowledge with the business strategy. So that is our main purpose. Also, it's common that the companies ask for make possible the projects, and when you have this background, you could asset the rest of the company to move the process of production very well because you have a whole perspective. And in my experience, sometimes the lawyer is the boring person in the company, because we always look at the risk in every decision. But it's important we will be involved because probably our participation could be the key for a successful project. If that we could fail in the project if we are not involved.
That is just literally a brave new world where lawyers do participate in the process and influence the decision making. Rafa, can you elaborate on this?
Sure, absolutely. I completely agree with Susan. And I think now the expectation when you are reporting to executives, not reporting to an attorney, but rather when your boss is the board of directors, the CEO, somebody who is running a business, he or she doesn't want to hear from a legal perspective, I think XYZ. There is one problem by the law that they go ahead and publish it so everyone can just read it. And I'm confident that a top-notch executive can Google any law and can read what it says. Executives don't want to know anymore, don't want to hear from their attorneys, oh, this is what the law says. Because they're going to be, oh, that's expensive for what I'm paying you. That's easy to find. So what I want to hear is that, I know that you know the law. Tell me, what do we have to do so we can meet our objective, so we can reach our goal? If it is, I don't know, building a power plant south of New Mexico, okay, how can we do it? Let's get the permits. There are risks involved. How can we take controlled risk? But give me a decision, give me a solution. Be a decision maker, be a business partner. As Susan said, regrettably, if you ask me, attorneys cannot remain on the safe side of the equation and just say, okay, this is what the law says. You go ahead, and if things go wrong, well, I told you what the law said. No, get accountability, and if things go wrong, it may be very well because you did not give the proper advice. That would be my 2 cents to the discussion.
Okay, very, very insightful, Rafa. And what you're mentioning is a transition of the role of the lawyer from just being the gatekeeper, don't care about anything else, and now to not just being the gatekeeper, but being able to flexibly size, to adjust, and to not only keep the house from burning, but at the same time seeing how it contributes to accomplishing the objectives. How do you do that, Renata?
Right. So the legal department was oftenly called in big companies the staff area. And I think that today is completely, incorrect. Actually, we have become executives. We are more and more called into the decision table, and we weigh in on the decision that the company is making. And also we are held accountable for that. So in my perspective, the GCs, besides all the legal knowledge, and the shift in how we work with our clients, like Rafa said, we have to be much more prepared in terms of business acumen, understand more than just the law, like he said, an executive can Google the law and get the advice from Google. So he expects much more from us, right? That we actually put ourselves in his position and determine what's best to the business. This has been challenging. We are having to work much harder in this sense to prepare to be in these meetings and to make those decisions. But from the other side, like you asked, how do we do it? It's by partnering more and more with the businesses, not just being sitting in our offices and just evaluating from a theoretically perspective. So we need to know the products. We need to know how they are manufactured. We need to know what is the lead time. We need to know what it takes, what's the cost of the products, what of the inputs. So, and I think that this personally for us as professional is very enriching, right? And it allows us even to get positions outside of the legal department if we want to. So that is pretty much my view, Rafa.
Following on this, Renata, which is very interesting. So now the GC of a large corporation or a middle-sized corporation with exposure to Mexico now has to truly understand the business, which means interaction with their internal clients to participate on the understanding of the needs that they have, so that the GC becomes a problem solver and not a undesirable stop from the business, which means that you have to do more, and you probably have the same people, the same budget, maybe even less.
People, less budget.
So, following this thought, how could external counsel would help you achieve this goal so that you can focus more on the relationship with your internal clients and the accomplishment of the corporate goals, and less with the day-to-day drafting, wording that takes time away from you, but at the same time it's important, but it's more important to be part of the strategy process.
Right. So external counsel plays a fundamental role for us GCs. You have been seeing in many companies, which is the case of 3M, of regionalization of legal positions. So the trend is not that anymore a company has a lawyer by country. They want the lawyer to expand. We know we have, bar limitations, jurisdiction limitations, but we have to adapt and try to mitigate that. In my position, for example, that covers all Latin America countries, I rely much on local external counsels. And what I mostly need from my external counsels, besides a fair budget, and always knowing that we have very limited budget, is to, one, we don't have time and we don't want to go for different specific counsels from different specific law firms. So we want you to have the ability to provide us in a complex situation that involves regulatory, that involves labor, that involves trade compliance aspect. We expect more and more that the external firms have this, like full service capacity to provide us with one provider, with one vendor, all the counseling that we need. And also another thing is that the external counsel's role has also changed alongside with ours, right? Now you are not someone who's sitting on your office far away, theoretically evaluating things. We have to partner, like the GC and the external law firm, which has, the deeper expertise on the legal matter and the legal acumen, and us, which we speak the language of the executives of the company. So when we partner, we take the legal counseling, transform it into an executive language. So we need shorter legal opinions, more objective things. We need your recommendation. Again, not just say, this is what the law says. So, and here are the risks. So there you go. That is my legal opinion. There's no room for that anymore in recent times, right? We want you to help us make a decision, and be accountable for that too. So it's really a relationship of partner guardians, like we like to phrase it at 3M.
Very insightful, Renata. Thank you. And it seems to me that GCs now need to be more. They have to develop soft skills as well, to communicate, to delegate, to coordinate, to lead. an enhanced role, which is good because it puts the GC on the spot of the C-suite, which is fantastic. But it seems from what you say that this is having a cascade effect on the outside
Yes.
counsel, which also needs to adapt and to be on top of these new needs. How do you handle that, Susan?
Well, I think our external lawyers, it's our, let's say, partner in crime, because we need a partner to discuss in a very deep way the technical part of the regulation, just to try to understand the perspective in the market. Because when you are focused on the business, sometimes you lose the perspective of the market. So our external lawyers could be our partners to understand what is going on in the market, and to have a benchmark of the situation. So I
A
think
benchmark. So, do you handle KPIs, key performance indicators, for everybody in the audience? Do you are beginning to manage KPIs and to establish them in your relationships with your outside
Yes, of
counsel?
course. Yes, of course. One of the most important thing for me is the proactivity, because always we know that as a lawyer we solve problems, but for me, be preventive. It's super top matter for me. So when our external lawyers be proactive and raise the hand, hey, probably the next year we will face new bills, so be careful with that. I think for me it's the first KPI, and then I always said, please convince me, please pretend that I'm the judge. So if you convince me, I will believe in you.
The devil advocate.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very good. Rafa, how do you deal with your outside counsel?
Yeah, well, I completely agree with what Renata and Susan has said. And I wonder that you may be asking, well, what does he have to do with moving manufacturing force from China to Mexico? And it's absolutely right on the spot, because if at some point in time I come to an attorney in Mexico explaining that I'm moving my manufacturing force from China to Mexico, I just don't want those attorneys to tell me this is the law in Mexico. That will not be enough. We need practical advice as in-house counsel. We just don't have the time nor the resources internally to get all the answers right. So we need those external counsels with the local knowledge, but also not only about the law, but about everything that is related to that business in Mexico, in this case, to come up with a comprehensive and holistical solution that touches not only the law, but anything else that may be a risk for what we're trying to do. So that would be, how to connect all the ideas to what we've been discussing today.
Thank you, Rafa. And with this, we finish our panel, and we have exactly 5 minutes for questions and answers. Thank you. So, questions? Yes, sir.
Right. It's a little bit more than that. I can say from my experience, I have faced many external legal opinions saying, well, you have many alternatives. Here are them. Here you have the risks. I quantify the risks in dollar amounts for you on in whatever currency you want. But for example, for me, I'm not a Mexican attorney, right? I come from another country. I'm neither a US attorney, I am a Brazilian attorney with responsibilities for those countries. So I need a little bit more on that risk assessment. Like, for example, if it was your business and you had all those alternatives, which one would you choose and why? And I'm not saying that necessarily I will have the same opinion than you, but I'm interested in hearing your perspective as a local counsel with the knowledge not only of the law, but what other companies do, how the government seems to accept or not those alternatives. So exactly.
Guillermo. Susan, I think this one's for
Yes,
you.
of course. The first one, Guillermo, it's to receive very quickly as soon as the bill could be put on the table of the government. It's the first one because you could prepare for a new initiative of the law.
So you establish specific maximum times of response to the
I hope
different.
that as soon as the project will be built, probably I receive a notice or a letter opinion from our external lawyers. Just raise the hand, hey Susan, probably the next. For example, now we know that there is a new package of labor bills for Mexico. So I expect from my external lawyers that raise the hand that hey, this is the new list of new law, the new reforms. So this is the first one. The second one is probably how the external lawyers be involved in our internal policies or an internal process or corporate standards because
So the onboarding.
onboarding, yeah.
So the process of onboarding so that they get to know your company. So do you establish onboarding requirements, training? How do you handle the onboarding?
First, I shared with my external lawyers the corporate policies, our ethical, and then we could evaluate that KPI when you receive an advice with a business perspective, because it's I know that your policy prohibits something, and I think it's the best way or offer you different. Solution for us the same problem. So in that part, we could say, I have a good lawyer, an external lawyer, and that is my partner to evaluate the risk of the company.
Renata, Rafa, would care to elaborate?
I just want lower bills.
That's all we want.
That's important.
That's all I care.
That's all we
I think
want.
that the mic is gonna go off right now.
No, just kidding. In my case, I regretfully our legal department is not that sophisticated, so we can have like formal KPIs for outside counsel. But one way for me of measuring it is, do we accomplish what we want? If it is a trial, did we win? If it is an M&A, did we acquire the target within the time frame? If whatever we're facing, all I always try to do is that things don't get stuck in a legal bottleneck, if you will. Whatever project has, engineers, accountants, finance people, you name it. Whenever something reaches legal, I try to make sure that something is out of legal as soon as possible, because there are so many pieces moving. Legal is definitely not the most important one most of the case. So you don't want the attorneys to be that. And let's face it, whenever there is an issue, they're gonna look at us, oh, the attorneys, and it's not, and I'm not gonna be able to say, oh, the law firm has not responded. I said that I don't care. I mean, this is your responsibility. So that would be my 2 cents. Yeah.
Renata, some final thoughts on this one?
Yeah, very quickly. So, objectively on, KPIs, I think that for more transactional activities that we contract with external counsels, it is expected that we get, some level of information in a more executive way. I will give an example. We have Sámano as our external counsel in Mexico for evaluating and reviewing agreements. So I get oftenly questioned by the executives, how many agreements have we had this year? for what businesses, in what amount. What is the size of the contractual dollar amounts by business? So these sort of dashboards or reports are becoming KPIs for us. And, as a fancy technologies that you guys can use, like Power BI or all these other tools that the executives love, the best. It puts us in a better position, right? So this is something we are starting to demand from our external counsels.
I think we have time for one final question.
And
Yes.
how do the external counsels do with the Power BI, for instance?
Again?
You mentioned that external counsels may be requested to use like Power BI.
Yeah.
How is Sámano doing with that?
No, they
that's
are not
proprietary.
yet.
That's
It's
confidential.
breaking news for them right now,
But what
I
I can
have until the end of the conference to sit with them and disclose. Next month, you have to present me a Power BI. That's coming, Vero.
what I can tell you is that I used to do presentations in PowerPoint, and now they have to be in Canva, and we're using Figma, and everything has to be in chart pies, visually attractive, a lot of information, concise, that can be visually eaten and processed very fast. So as they are changing and evolving in the role of GCs, so we are, and that means also getting acquainted with new technology. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.